Hi guys, I'm joined today with Gary G6 Turner. He's recently turned IFBB Pro. He's been in the bodybuilding industry for a long, long time. He's a representative of Animal Pack, and he brings a lot to the table in terms of motivation, has a tremendous physique, brings in really good conditioning to the bodybuilding scene. So I'm delighted to have him on today. How you doing?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Cheers, appreciate that. Yeah, so I'd just like to ask you today a bit about mindset and motivation and what kind of goes into being a now recently turned pro bodybuilder. People think it's just take gear, eat a lot of food, go to sleep, train. People don't understand what goes on behind the scenes. So I really want to delve into that a little bit. So you tell me a bit about yourself, like where you came from, maybe when you started to train and stuff like that.
Yeah. I started training 2006. So I was a freshman in college, second semester to be exact. A lot of people see me and they ask me, "Hey, were you like a high school football player or a wrestler?" And I did do that in early high school. I did it in middle school, but when they asked me that, they asked me because I'm big. So they assume that I played sports like that and was like that. I played those sports, but I wasn't big in high school. I was actually little. I was actually a genetically, like I'm like a skinny guy, but like still would hold fat in the stomach area. I called that shit shape. And long story short, I didn't lift in high school. I thought it was the stupidest thing ever. Like I thought if the gym teacher would tell you to go to the gym, I thought, this is so stupid. So I ended up going to college. I put like 20 pounds on the first semester, like eating pizza and doing nothing and partying, drinking beer. And I realized that like, well, I'm going to have to do something about this because I want to get in just better shape. I didn't want to even like have a six pack. I knew that was going to be very difficult to do. I just wanted to be in a little bit better shape, just so honestly, so girls would like me, so that I would, I would get more girls. And so I started running 5 days a week. I was weight training 3 days a week. I remember the first day walking into the kid next to me in the dormitory and asking him, because I knew he played football in high school, very basic stuff. And I said, "How do you bench press?" He's like, what are you talking about? He was like, just explain, like, your arms need to come up the same time. And because I said, I'm going to go to the gym for the first time today. And I did. I remember the first ever exercise I did was a bench press, and I got stuck under 95 pounds. I got the second rep. Somebody had to come save me because I got it stuck on my chest. And that snowballed into everything. Whereas I became kind of the gym guy on campus, so I was like, if I had to compare what I looked like, more like a men's physique guy, but not like the top men's physique guys. Like those guys are crazy, but like an entry level, Abercrombie, those the kind of a beach look. Everyone thought I was jacked then because they didn't know any better. They never seen like a bodybuilder or a truly like jacked guy. And then it just really snowballed there through college. I would eat healthy in college, but I didn't meal prep. So like that was not like, I wasn't like weighing food out and all that stuff like that. But I was basically, if I went out to eat, like it would be like a chicken and rice bowl. So I would use stuff like that. And then I graduated and went to a hardcore gym that was in my town. And so from there, I had somebody approach me and say, "Hey, man, you're in really good shape. You should do a bodybuilding show." And I had a girlfriend at the time of 5 years who hated bodybuilding. She said we could never date if you did a bodybuilding show. So I told that person, no, I'm not going to do. I don't want to do that. And I put it off, but I knew in the back of my head that I wanted to. And finally got the courage to tell her. We broke up right there, and I walked out of her house and started a few months later to get ready for my first show, which was 2010. And, I've been competing since 2010 I think I took 3 of the years from 2010 to 2023 off, to add size and whatnot. So that's where it led. And I mean, there was just many stages of the game in there, from being really bulked, to honestly having like some form of an eating disorder where I didn't want to put any body fat on in the off season. And, so I stayed super lean and super strict, but it sucked, so, and then, there was a lot of different phases throughout the time.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I've been there before myself. Like I've I'm not a pro bodybuilder by any means, but I've tried really hard to get serious mass. I mean, how effective was that for you, Gary? I mean, obviously, to get really, really big, we do have to, push the weight a bit, get more just weight on your body. How big was that for you?
The biggest I've ever weighed in, it was 308. And that was at the gym, but 302 was the most fasted, and it was not a good 302. This was in 2019. So like before I took 2019 off, thinking 2020 was my year, and then the pandemic fucked everything up, even though I competed. But I pushed it. And when people think that, like, they hear that, and I was I looked more like a lineman on an American football team. So like, I had a belly, the weight belt was it was wide. The waist was not tight. The legs were huge, like 33 inches. Arms were like 22, but the lower back fat was way out of there, and the lower belly fat. And people assume, they think like that is like when they say dirty bulk, like, oh, he's probably eating pizza every day or doing all this, just eating really bad. And I wasn't. It still looked like a bodybuilding prep diet. However, it was like heavy duty in, like, the fats were really high, the carbs were really high. So it was like, it was just a lot of food, but it was bodybuilder food. So I tell people, I'm like, don't think that I was at like Pizza Hut all the time. I still stuck to like one cheat meal a week religiously, even in that sort of thing. Do I think that it was effective in adding to the mass and to the look that I was today? Yeah, you're gonna have two camps of people that know me that are split on this. Some people still think that I couldn't have got this way, albeit that I probably went a little far with it without doing that. I personally saw my best gains when I stayed leaner. And when I say like leaner, I mean like for me, like 260 was like good, not 300, not 290. Because I think when I got to that point, I was just literally adding fat on. There was probably not a pound of muscle tissue that got on, just because insulin resistance was probably all fucked. And I know it was, because my blood sugar was up and I was trying to get it down. And that was a constant battle. So I wasn't processing nutrients the best I could. And then all that went away when I stayed leaner, so I think, and that was a more mature approach to it with better coaching and stuff like that. So, it's, I'm on the middle ground with it. I don't regret going to 300, because it was a milestone that I wanted to hit. But when I got there, I realized that it wasn't all it was cracked up to be, in terms of it's like I always say this analogy. It's like buying a really expensive house. Your family and friends are going to come over and they're going to go, this house is great. But you're the one that's stuck with the mortgage payment at the end when they leave. And that's the same thing that goes with being 300. People are like, hey, he's 300, man. He's huge. Da, 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 da. But you're still the one that's stuck with the side effects that come with that, getting the fat off when it's time for competition. And, to be honest with you, when I came down from that 300 for the 2020 season, which I started at 300, I got down to 222, and I wasn't even close to being, and how flat I was, because you can't feed the way that you would with that. Very few guys could come with that kind of catastrophic weight loss and then still be full, peeled, skin tight, and everything like that. And then years after that, the seasons after that, I stayed leaner in the off season, and I weighed heavier on stage and was better conditioned. And then this most recent one was my lightest one. When I was switched over with Dom Cardone as a coach, I think that we started prep at 250. It might even be 249. And I weighed, and this is the lightest that I've weighed. I weighed in at 215 for the universe this year, but I was next level peeled, and that's the reason I won. So anybody listening, don't get so caught up in the body weight. Honestly, like it really comes down to where you are in your career, age, if you want to push a little bit. But if conditioning's your issue, then you probably should try to stay pretty lean in the off season within reason. I don't mean stay 5 pounds above stage, but try to keep the outline of your abs And so, and it's just so that you're processing the nutrients. So everything that you're doing is productive.
Yeah, I like that. I think a lot of people, like you said, they just push the scale weight. It doesn't often translate to like a massive bodybuilder. I think it's, Jordan Peters, he sort of says, push up maybe 30 pounds body weight of the off season, cut back a bit, push back about, try not to get above 30 pounds stage weight. And I seem to be around about there myself, maybe 20, 30 pounds at a time. I think listening to your body signals as well is really important. So I'm sure when you got up to about 308 or whatever it was, walking upstairs, heavy breathing, you can't train, no endurance, no cardio, fitness, nothing. So would you change anything going back, do you think? I mean, would you apply yourself differently?
Yeah. It was, well, there were different stages. Like there were certain stages where, when I trained with Matt Porter, we stayed really lean, but that was, it was just a style. And it was just a kind of a neurotic mindset for me. And then, so it was tough to like relax. When they say off season, there was no off season where it was like, you could chill out because you still had to keep yourself in check. That's the hard part about bodybuilding. Where like compared to like other sports, like those guys get a real off season. They go golfing, they go on vacation for a month, they don't do anything of their sport. And then when it's time to get into camp to get ready for the time, they can get going. But with bodybuilding, it's your body. And if you let it get too far out, it could fuck up even your contest prep and your outcome of your look. So that's where the hard part is. However, by staying so strict mentally, it really can mess you up. And there's don't let these people, these motivational speakers on Instagram tell you about, if you want to be successful, you're not going to be balanced. With it, that is within context and within a certain level, but you do need to be some sort of balance. And I did not have very good control of that. So I became a neurotic bodybuilder and people knew me like that. Like I wouldn't put any like artificial sweeteners in anything, like in the off season. And I thought that was the difference that was going to make up me winning or losing. It doesn't. The guys that beat you are going to be the guys that can beat you. And that's the problem. It's not a problem. That's just the nature of bodybuilding, is that it's very genetic. And it really comes down to who shows up at your show. If Jay Cutler showed up at my show in prime condition, I don't win. I don't care how perfect I was on the diet. You can't out-train a guy that has genetics like that. So sometimes the results are already written in the stars with that. But in terms of like one regret I do have in bodybuilding, I did suffer a pec tear. And this was before I even got on stage. This was actually 15 days before my 21st birthday. I was a senior in college. I didn't even know what a muscle tear was. I just knew something really, really bad happened in the gym. I was flat benching, just like everybody does, just like every kid does. Didn't even know any better. And it was 365, and it was the 7th rep. So it wasn't even a max out rep. And they say that's how it usually happens. It's a weight usually you can handle for a decent amount of reps, and then something bad happens. It's never usually the 1 rep max. My elbows, I got a little fatigued. My elbows bowed out. I went a little bit low on the chest with the bar. It created the line, and I watched it in my t-shirt. I had headphones in, and I heard it sounded like Velcro coming apart. And the whole shirt went like this and popped up. And I had somebody re-react. I went, oh, and it was obviously immediately tight. And it was on my tattooed side, but I didn't have the tattoo at all at the time. By the next day, it was as bruised, as dark as my tattoo, and it just started dripping. So I went to the orthopedist. They did an MRI. They said it was a muscle tear, but like a rupture, like the muscle, its belly itself just ripped apart. He said, we can't do surgery on it because it would be like sewing roast beef. He goes, it wouldn't hold. He goes, if your tendon ripped out, we could drill that back. It'll be a full recovery, be a longer recovery, but your pec would be it would look better. This, as you can tell, there's a dent, and when I flex, you can see that dent come across. Now, has that held me back in the past? Maybe, especially that the shows were like genetically I'm already against the 8 ball, like the USAs and the open pro qualifiers and stuff like that. But I've never competed without the pec tear. So I don't know what it would have been like to have 2 good pecs. This was before I ever got on stage. So I always told myself to not allow that as a crutch. And if I'm so shredded, they can't not give it to me. So pec tear or not. So that was always my policy. And I wasn't always like violently conditioned. But this last year I did get that way. And that's why, because the guys that were in my first call out that I beat had better genetics. They had better shape. But when they got compared to me, it was just a level above in conditioning, and they didn't have those tears like that. So, yeah, I mean, I know that people have injuries. That doesn't mean that you just throw it away. You try to overdo another aspect. If maybe you could pose it a certain way that could, or from another side or something like that can work around it. So,
yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. It's tough. I mean, it must have been really difficult because you're looking back at those stage photos with a pec tear from like years prior, and you're thinking, oh, for fuck's sake, like, how am I going to improve this? I don't know how I would apply myself after that point. I've got, you would have obviously heard of someone called Ronnie Coleman who's snapped his back up. Well, I've got near enough the same thing in my back. So I've got 2 scars down the bottom of my spine. And I'm kind of looking at people like you who have achieved such great things in spite of major injuries. So, I mean, my question to you is, like, how would you come back from that,
Well, I'd say the first thing is that there's no absolutes in bodybuilding. Like what people say, they say that you don't have to do anything. Don't let anybody ever say any movement is absolute that you have to do. And that's true. I didn't really, I have a huge back. My back lat spread's pretty crazy, but I don't deadlift. And is it genetic? Probably, yeah. But if you have back issues, if you have a herniated disc, whatever, in your lower back or whatever it is, don't deadlift. Don't think because you saw Ronnie deadlifting like that off the ground, or Dorian deadlifting, and they got crazy back. Dude, that's a lot of genetics. That's the same thing like saying, if I want big arms, but when I do a dumbbell curl, it hurts my elbow, but the preacher curl doesn't. I'm just using an example there. Well, then do the preacher curl. Don't think because you saw Kevin Levrone doing dumbbell curls that you have to do dumbbell curls, or you don't have to follow. There's a lot more that goes down into the equation than that. And fighting through direct pain because of injury is not one of those things. I also believe in certain movements that you feel that maybe the experts say, oh, that's not maximally contracting that muscle. You know what I mean? Everybody wants to claim was it EMS or something? The EMG, was it? Where like the electrodes are put to the muscle to see how much the muscle fibers are firing and how effective that contraction is with building it. That's all well and good. But I know there was people who hate the abductor machine, where you push outward. It says it doesn't hit your glutes. Okay, well, it hits something fucking in my glutes, whether it's underneath or whatever. But my side leg, which I did this religiously because I just loved the way it felt and I liked the way it made my glute look. And my side shots were out of control, where the glute was hanging there and all this bells and whistles were having there. So don't marry yourself to certain movements, but also don't give up other movements that you do like, that you're getting a lot out of, just because a study or a textbook says that. So with your injuries, man, if you can't do something, don't. But if you can do something else or a modification, it might require some thinking, but that's how you would go about it. You might have to think your way through this session a little bit more rather than just clanging and banging.
Yeah, that's solid advice. I think as much as we can, like you said, look at these EMG studies and science and this, that, and the other. The thing is, what is your body dealing with at that point in time, and how are you going to get past it? It's all a big science experiment. Like Gary, you're probably a bit like me. You've had to work around your pec tear, do different movements, try to maximize the shape by different kind of angles, things like that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I can completely get behind that. I've got a question now as well. It's more so for some of the gear users that might be watching this sort of video. So are you able to give an outline of what you think is like safe practice for gear use in the off season and contest prep phase, something like that.
Yeah. I'm more of an old school gear guy. That like when I say old school, I mean like I came up at a different time that like was like where we had to learn on the forums. So if you remember back in the day, like I said, I started training in 2006. Obviously I wasn't taking gear then. Started taking gear in 2008. My first, I guess, gear that you would say in 2007 that I took about a year and a half into training, but that was at the end of the pro hormone ban. So if you remember, like back then, like they had M1T by Gaspari, Superdrol was still, you could buy it in stores, even though that was like pretty much a steroid. Both of them were steroids, but there was just, it was different laws back then that allowed it. By the time I got into it, they were already banned, but there was a couple guys that were walking around the gym that still had them because they got like all of them off the shelf, like when they heard the ban was coming. So I did take like the Gaspari M1T. So obviously that was my first like introduction to like steroids, but my first real cycle, I say, is in 2008. And we learned from the forums. So you just had to be on a forum and you sat there and you found a couple guys that were mods that were like, they were the trusted guys. They had a ton of posts. Everybody, you could tell everybody respected their advice. Maybe you knew who they were, maybe you didn't, but they had the credentials. And back then, it was, you started 500 tests, maybe 400, but 500 tests was like the number. And you would do that for like 10 weeks. And that I did my first at that for 9 weeks. So I did, your standard Monday and Thursday injection, 1 cc. Back then you couldn't, the kids nowadays have it easy. They could Venmo money, they could Bitcoin money, they can ask guys in the gym, and I get it. It's good to be open because we should educate, where they're like to help people out, right? But they don't understand that back in the day that if I were to walk up to the gym vet and ask him what he was using or like what I should use, there'd probably be a fist fight. It just wasn't the culture in society. You had to get in on the inner circle, befriend them. They had to trust you. They had to know you weren't a cop. They had to know like all, and then that was how you began to do that. Now, they could go to a website, they could Venmo the money, PayPal the money. It's pretty crazy. You're probably going to get it because the sources don't want you to go on the boards and say, hey, this guy stole $200 from me. And fuck him, so that nobody else buys from his website. But in terms of the gear usage, I do believe that nowadays it definitely has gone down, the recommended starting. So you see guys starting at like 200-300 tests, which is not necessarily a bad thing. However, I wonder about like we only get one time out of first cycle. So like we know that first cycle could be a 20 to 25 pound blow up and people are like, holy shit, what happened to this guy? So you do want to maximize that. However, you do want to, when you go into like your second, third, and fourth cycle, like, years down the line after you PCT and whatnot, you do want to slowly increase or slowly add a compound in addition. And I did do that, rather than shoot it really high up. So like my second cycle was like 500 tests, and I think it was 30 milligrams D-ball front load for the first 4 weeks. Nothing crazy, but I just added that test day. Same. Second cycle was 500 tests, 400 DECA, 30 milligrams D-ball. So it was just like adding one thing at a normal dose. I didn't do trend until like my 7th cycle. That's a big difference nowadays because trend now has a marquee like name, they make memes about it, the gym pages, this guy trend, I just got to get on trend and stuff like that. But people don't realize that's the most toxic shit that is on the market. Does it work the best? Yeah, but trend should not be used for anybody that's unless getting on stage. I'm sorry to say that. I know it works the best, but it's going to fuck you up the most. And if you're not getting anything out of it, you're not getting anything out of it. And so it's sad to see that. And it's sad to see like sometimes I'm in the locker room and I know high school kids are there and they know that they see me and they know that I might be eavesdropping what they're saying or they want me to eavesdrop. So they keep saying trend because it's a buzzword and I don't show any kind of like I'm interested or hearing what they're saying because I'm not trying to get a reaction out of them. And it's just it's kind of sad with that. But I do believe the overall dosages have gone down in terms of like when you talk to these young kids, they're like, no, I'm just going to do like, 300 tests, 200 mass run, which is like, I say fine because I know that they're not going to hurt themselves. Do I think it's going to be crazy effective? No. Do I know that the pros that are out there right now are completely lying? I know their cycles. I have the inside track. They're lying. Most people lie because if something bad happens, nobody wants to be blamed. There are people doing 3,000 milligrams a test. There's nobody online that is saying that because God forbid they have a stroke or a heart attack or they end up in the hospital, their coach is going to get blamed, even if he's not the one telling them to do it. And then people say, well, that's what you get for doing 3,000 milligrams a test. So, and you also could think about it logically. Nasser did that. Craig Titus did that. Jay Cutler just admitted on a podcast he was taking 200 milligrams of Anadrol. Nasser was taking 10 a day, and it was written down in Milos's freaking journal. So it's like, what, those guys did, but only the guys nowadays, they don't do it? No. And they're going to the Olympia. If you're going to the Olympia and you have a chance to win, you're going to do everything that you can to push to make it happen. I did it, and mine was for freaking the universe, for a pro card, and I was pulling out all the stops. Why would those guys not? So but I understand also why they would never admit it, also because you're going to have a young kid who's going to say, I'm going to do 3,000 milligrams a test. That's a bad move. So it's the gear question is there's like two sides of it. I don't really know which side I'm on because I like being truthful and I like to hope that like the kids would look at me and go, fuck that. And then but some won't. Some are crazy. So it's like, you don't want to say too much, but the other problem that the kids are doing, and not even kids, like people who they're not buried in the game long enough. They're the blasted crews. The reason I stay on a TRT dose and blast and cruise is because I've gotten off before. My total test was 17. I mean, that's unhealthy. That's when you know. But when you get a kid who just ran his first 500 milligram test cycle, he goes, I'm going to go down to 150 a week, and I'm going to cruise there for 10 weeks, and then I'll come back up to 500. I said, why? Like, you're brand new to this. You get a good PCT, and you're just as good as new. You know, it's not like you get blood work and you're all like fucked up. And like the cruise part of that whole thing is because you can't get back in time, or you can't get back at all because you're just, you're 10 years into the game or something like that. So that I don't like, because I don't think that a lot of like certain people are like that committed to bodybuilding or like that entrenched in like the sport that they would need to do that. I think that they're just being lazy because they want to take something,
Yeah, I can get behind that. It's very tricky to sort of tell people. I mean, unless I'm sat like in front of someone like I am now, like talking to you, or you're talking to me, you can kind of tell how big someone is, how they apply themselves to the diet, training, recovery. And the thing is, everyone I speak to, near enough 9 times out of 10, doesn't have all their ducks lined up in a row. So me telling them to emulate my sort of cycle in the past wouldn't be useful to them. They've not done what's warranted to get to that point. Like my first cycle was 250 Deca, 250 test. Mm-hmm. My most recent cycles have been under a gram. Mm-hmm. And I'm still using about 2 compounds, maybe 3 at a push. But I completely get behind what you're saying. Yeah, things like trend, the more, should I say, risky, the more problematic kind of compound should be used sparingly and only when you've weighed up that risk reward kind of thing. So yeah, I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, there's just different tools for the job. Like one of my favorite compounds is Winstrol, but you'll never see me use it except for getting ready for a show. Same thing with Masteron. Like I don't use Masteron in the off season. That's a new age thing, but I just don't think that it's that needed. I definitely don't use Trend in the off season. It would work if I ran a test Trend off season cycle. It would work really well, but so would a test Deca cycle. So, which would be like not killing me as much, If you're in an off season, it's not that I would say important, but it's not that like pertinent at the time that you have to do the most like toxic shit. You know what I mean? You wouldn't use halo testing in the off season. So, because it's going to, why? Because it makes you a little aggressive. Well, you're in the off season. Just get your head together a little bit more and get in the gym. You don't need a fucking drug that's going to put your liver out of your ass to do that. So
Yeah, I agree, and I completely get that. I mean, I go back to the point where I said it's like a scientific experiment. You're weighing up, okay, if I use this compound, like for example, I don't know, halotestin or trenbolone, what if you're in the off season trying to pack on the mass and that, you know, wrecks your liver or affects your kidneys or ruins your ability to eat? Your capacity to eat is what's gonna turn you into a huge fucking bodybuilder. If you can't do that, it's not going to be useful. So, yeah, like in your case, test DECA, something like that, be much more sensible. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the knowledge is coming out more with the more guys that are, you know, putting out information. They're putting out good stuff like that. I think that people run on extremes too much, meaning like they draw a line in the sand and then they go one way or another. So you have there's like a camp now that's like TRT dose test, but then very high mastodon. And then there's your high test, which is more of like an American type thing. The Europeans don't usually do that. And then more like high test, high EQ, you know what I mean? And like, so it's like, well, maybe there's a middle ground, which is probably the answer. You know what I mean? So, you know, and I've tried all like, you know, different ones and I've seen which ones were more effective. And so you got to also like work it out for yourself. I don't want to say make yourself into a science experiment because people are going to take that to heart and they're going to do that and they shouldn't do that. But in reality, not everybody's going to react the same way. You know, just flat out, I took 700 milligrams at the end of my prep with Tren. Most people can't sleep on that. I did. The worst part about the whole thing is that I got Tren cough a lot. So I guess my Tren was real. But some people can't handle that, and but I could have. I took a decent amount of Winstrol at the end of my prep. Some people can't do that without their knees hurting or their joints hurting. Didn't affect me like that. So not all the side effects are there. Some people, when they say, you know, people quote the word genetics, but they're usually referring to shape. But there's a genetic component to side effects to gear use, side effects to like you not dying. You know what I mean? Like in terms of like bad blood work. Some people take a couple of shots of test, they get their blood work done, and it looks like shit. And then some people get off of a massive cycle for prep. They go 8 weeks later, and their stuff looks like pristine. You know, their cholesterol is good. That's genetics. Some people, you know, that's how that could be weighted. So, in the same sense, that's why not everybody's cycles should be like cookie cutter in terms of like that. Dosages, especially.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, one thing I'm trying to do is my diet is, I guess you could say, high protein, high fat, very close to zero carbs. As you probably know, like when you've dieted, I'm sure you've done like keto diets and things like that before. You found your appetite just doesn't let you eat a lot of food. So what I'm trying to do is get to my biggest ever on that diet just to see if it can be done. So that's my own little scientific experiment. That's my way of, you know, I've got my objective markers where I say, okay, I'm not going to continue bulking if this happens.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure you got the same kind of mindset, perhaps.
Yeah, and you know what? Like a lot of the things, like with bulking, is it doesn't have to go straight through. You can run a mini cut to resensitize, get your body fat in check. Sometimes mentally do something different so that you don't feel like, you know, you're always forcing food and stuff like that. And then once you get like, you know, 4 weeks into it, you can reverse course again and come back, slowly ramp it back up, and then, you know, go with that. You know, and especially in your case, you're doing high fat, high protein. If you wanted to lean up, you increase cardio, you lower the fat a bit, you cut 10, 15 pounds off, you're getting hungry again because the food volume's not as high. And, you know, of course, fats are more satiable. So, you know, you're not taking as much in. And then maybe after that, you say, okay, I'm in a good spot here. I'm going to ramp up the carbs, but keep the fats the same. Your body size should go up at that point. But it's just a lot of yo-yoing. People, I know it's for me that when I did the very long off seasons, you know, the year long, those didn't work out well for me. A lot of the times, of course, I competed often at the end because I wanted to. I knew it was kind of the end of my career, but a lot of the muscle tissue I was adding on was in the rebound phase, and until you get to a certain body fat percentage, then you got to start figuring it out. But it was like I always felt like the competition itself was the reason that I got bigger for the competition the next year, was because I rebounded out. And then by the time you hit an off season that wasn't crazy long, because you would have to restart your prep again for the following year, it was almost like a very intense mini cut almost, you know what I mean? But some of these guys like, I'm not going to compete for the next 3 years until I'm 260 fat-free mass. I said, brother, you better hope you have genetics like that, because that you can get to a point where there's no more muscle coming on and you're eating maximum food. And it just, for me, that came that way, where like I'm just live and learn, but I sure at the end of it, of that bulk, there was no muscle being added on. Any weight that you saw on the scale or like size was just fluid and fat retention and stuff like that. So people don't realize, like, when you see a pros, you know, when you saw Dorian Yates posing 300 pounds and his guest posing, that's mostly water weight. He's lean still. It's not what we see on stage. So when you look at his glutes and stuff, like, yeah, he looks fat a little bit, but it's mostly water. If he were to diet and then pull his water, he would be lean again. Whereas the young guys like myself, we had fat. There was fat stores on us rather than just water from, you know, pushing food, pushing the gear. So people don't realize exactly how much muscle those guys have, or in their case, how little muscle they have until they diet down. I have clients that say, well, you think I'm going to be like a light heavyweight? I'm like, no, I think you're going to be a middleweight because I think you're going to go right past the light heavyweight. And I'm always forward with them on that because I don't want them to be surprised. I want them to get mentally acclimated to it, because when that could be a huge ego hit. If they thought that they were going to be in a certain weight class and for them to look fully shredded, it's going to be the weight class below. Maybe it was the weight class that they were just trying to get out of. And I tell them, I said, but it's not a waste of an off season if you end up in the same thing. If you're double as shredded and you're in the same weight class, well, there's muscle added and you look better. So don't always like marry yourselves to a weight class. It's like, you know, everybody's always like, this look in this condition plus 10 pounds. I'm like, you're going to lose. That's the nail in the coffin saying right there in bodybuilding. Nobody could do that, because you should be trying to double your conditioning for the next time. You're not going to double your conditioning and add 10 pounds on. If you double your conditioning, you might be lighter, like I was. 2021, when I took 5th at the USA, I weighed in at 235, and I was in good condition, but not like psychotic. I weighed 215, 20 pounds lighter in 2023. Did I walk around and go, oh man, all those off seasons were a waste of time? And no, man, I'm trying to win this fucking show, man. That's just the way it played out. So I try to get these guys so stage weight or weight class oriented, because they get crazy.
Gary, how tall are you out of interest?
5'9".
Okay, fair enough. I was going to say 215 at like my height would be a bit.
Yeah. How tall are you?
I'm just under 6'1". I compete at about 215, 220.
Yeah, I'm 5'9", and yeah, 215. And I got on stage. That was that 215 was the day before the show, but the morning when I woke up fasted for the show, it was 213.8. And to tell you the truth, I haven't weighed that since 2017 contest.
Yeah,
but I knew,
incredible.
I knew in the pictures, like when I posed in the pictures, and I was like, oh, it'll take a monster conditioned guy to be able to knock this out. So how could you be mad? Nobody would have known like what I weigh. I could have went in there and said I weighed 230. I could have probably looked it. So it wouldn't have mattered. So again, that's also the reason that I tell these kids, you could tell people whatever weight you want and they're going to believe you. So don't make sure that the weight that you actually are looks right.
Yeah. Yeah, I can get behind that. Yeah, definitely. I'm in a weird spot. So over here in England, we have weight classes just like you do over there. I'm sure the rest of the world does. And our weight categories are significantly lighter than yours. So the classic weight for me at 6 foot one or just under, is about 10 pounds or so less than the classic weight over there in the US, which is tough because I'm 6'1" and I've got quite a big frame, but I'm near the top of my weight category, maybe 1 or 2 kilos off, but I'm not winning these shows oftentimes. So what would you do for me? Because I mean, for me, it seems like I'm going to have to just inflate to get to that, that point.
So you're saying you're almost at the classic weight cap. What is it? What is the weight cap? 220?
It's about 220, yeah.
Anyway,
that was 2 years ago. I competed at about 218 or something.
I would stay very lean in your off season, and I would really, really try to aggressively get down, and almost go like, just to put a number on it. I don't know exactly, but 10% better condition, 15% better condition, and just overdo. Try to shoot like starting at the beginning of your prep. Shoot for 210. Even if you miss it a little bit, you'll definitely be in there. Don't try to wait till the last minute to make 220, because I think that if you go past it, you'll be that much percentage more conditioned. Now, I'm not saying that you weren't conditioned in there, and I don't think a lot of people who think this way, but I asked them, are you Andreas Munzer on stage? Well, then there's some, right. So then maybe there's some more that everybody could go. You know what I'm saying? Like, rather, I think that people are settling for their conditioning. Like when I was 235, I was in good condition, but I shouldn't have settled there because I wasn't like, I didn't walk out and the judges were like, "Whoa!" Like it wasn't mind-boggling. So there was more to go. You should be striving to be the most shredded guy that they've ever seen. Whether we land there or not, that's the question. But I would just really attack your prep more aggressive right out of the gate, and not dilly-dally around and try to get yourself well below that. And then you'll be, I think, because otherwise you're going to have to go to bodybuilding if you can't make it.
Yeah, for me, that's going to be a big jump. I mean, pushing the food on the diet that I'm on. I'm on a diet basically that makes it so you're meant to be your ideal body weight, the weight that you're meant to be at to perform the given task you have each day.
Yeah.
The satiety signal is so high. I mean, I'm eating probably close to 300 protein, 300 fat at the moment, and I'm like really struggling to get these meals down. I'm doing the training, I'm pushing these things. I think what might be useful for me is to, like, a mini cut down the line a few weeks from now, go up a bit and just cut right back down. And one thing I did do in 2018 or something was I just said, fuck it, let's just get my weight as low as possible. And I was the most conditioned guy in the UK BFF in 2018. Cross-striated hamstrings, glutes, like peanut, all that sort of stuff. But it's weird because I was looking at that thinking, God, I really had to cut a lot to look like that, but I got the win. So, and it wasn't a look that I preferred, so it's a bit tougher. It's like, what they say about Cedric Millen. He's like my bodybuilding idol. He presented on stage what he wanted to look like. Yeah. He probably could have cut back down further if he had the opportunity to, perhaps, but it's a hard balance getting your head around that. And I know you just wanted the win after all these shows. So yeah,
that was when it's hard to say if it was my favorite, because if I look at the shows, like even last year, like the pictures, like I looked bigger, but so I was definitely more pulled down, but we're talking from a bodybuilding standpoint. I did want to win so that I could go out. But, there's different looks, that are not always meant that the most conditioned or the most successful show that you've had is the look that you like, and that goes even bigger to choosing a division, for the young guys that come up and maybe never competed. I always ask them the first thing is they say, well, I'm going to do men's physique. And I say, well, let me ask you a question. Because if they don't have a men's physique, or they say, well, I'd say I want to do classic physique because they like it. And I say, let me ask you something. Do you think that you have a classic physique? Do you want to do classic physique? What's their reasoning? And they say, well, I really want to be an open bodybuilder, but I'm not big enough for it. I said, then you have to wait. The classic physique is not the minor leagues, or men's physique is not the minor leagues for open bodybuilding. You don't do that first and then graduate. That is a specific look. We all know that. That's Arnold, Frank Zane. That's what they're looking for. Chris Bumstead. That's what they want. Men's physique, not really familiar with all the guys like that, but they have specific looks that they're after, and it's very genetic. Those two classes are more genetic than bodybuilding is, because bodybuilding has a large array of different kinds of looks. You can have your Nick Walkers, but you can have your Derek Lunsfords, and those are very different bodybuilders. So it's like, but the classic physique guys, there's a standard. So I asked the kids, I say, so you want to do open bodybuilding, but you're just not there yet. I said, you know what we did back in our day when there was no classic or men's physique? You waited and you stayed in the gym and you stayed in the stands and kept adding mass until it's your time to get up there. And I said, and I think that's what you should do. You want to go up there in classic physique or men's physique because you want to tell social media. You want to tell social media that you're doing a show because you've seen all your buddies and everybody oohs and ahs and they like your photo because every week you're getting leaner, and that is not a reason to do a bodybuilding show. The reason to do is to get to where you need to be to do the division that you like and you prefer. If I if I was men's physique, but I didn't look like men's physique, well, that would be a problem. You know what I mean? So like a lot of these, I just really don't like when they treat the classic physique division, especially as the minor leagues, because they're smaller guys. First off, they're twice as shredded as at the Olympia level. They're twice as shredded as the open guys. And I figured out that that's probably because they're trying to get their body weight down because they got to make the weight. These open guys, they're trying to keep their body weight up so that they can freaking seem huge or that. And what that does is they miss condition. There's no reason that Michael Dable has that kind of condition, but nobody in the open has that kind of condition. Because if they did in the open, they win. Derek Lunsford maybe is close to that. But it's just, I figured it out because like when I came down in my weight, I started getting more and more shredded because I was more focused on not keeping my weight high. I was trying to see, I knew that I could go all the way down to 198, before it goes to light heavyweight, which I didn't want to do. But I was utilizing the bottom half of the weight class as like a buffer zone rather than going to the top. So like when I hit 225 for the first time, I didn't freak out. I wasn't like, oh my God, it's 3 weeks out and we're already in weight and now I'm going to lose more and I'm going to be in the middle of the class. I was like, fuck it. If I go to the middle of the class, I'm going to be more shredded. There's no way that he's going to let me like burn all my muscle off. He watches me every 15 minutes. So it's like, I believe that's why the classic guys come so much more shredded than the open guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think the same. People are excited about weights, and they're not weighing you on stage either. The only place they're weighing you is a place where it counts, which is in a weight category kind of show. But I mean, you're always trying to find that balance, which is a tough ask, especially for like us sort of like bigger guys, like taller, perhaps bodybuilders. A lot of these guys are like 5'6", so they can do what they want. Me, if I try and carb up, it's not a good look. My belly's like out here, sort of thing. So I have to compete quite flat, which is a bit of a shame, really. But
when you carb up, here's just a little tip for you that I learned. When you're in your carb up, from like say like the Saturday show Saturday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, like when you're like officially carbing up, get your protein real low, like low, 2 ounces. Like if you're doing 8, because you don't need protein at the time. And if you're trying to keep your body weight like from like ballooning or your belly from coming out, keeping the protein low will lower inflammation and will lower food volume in your belly. And protein gets gassy, so it will push your stomach out. I've had shows where my stomach was like in my front relaxed. I couldn't like keep it in. And then this time when this is like Dominic's thing, it was like super glued. Like the front relaxed was perfect. The side quarter turns, stomach was glued to my stomach, perfectly flat. Never had that ever. So I'm saying for you who's having, you're going to go into your carb up worried that you're going to balloon up over your weight class category. If you were to lower your protein to say 2 ounces, like on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then do whatever you need to do with your carbs and fats, whatever rice and stuff like that, that's less food. Your weight will stay the same from morning to night, and you might make it easier.
Yeah, that's solid advice. Like you say, I think we've covered a lot here, like the specific nutrition, doing what needs to be done at that given time. You're not going to lose muscle when you're eating 1,000 grams of carbs. Like, Come on.
No.
You're not training most of the time anyway.
And
So.
you're not really training, and you're not trying to build muscle. Because what the main reason that we eat 7, 8, 9 ounces of protein on a normal day at a meal is we're trying to build and repair muscle. Well, you're definitely not trying to do that 2 days before the show. So why do you need it? You don't.
That's solid. Yeah. Yeah, we've covered a lot, I think. We've covered drugs, injuries, training, specificity, goal setting, physiques, competing, pre-contest phase, carb up. I think it's about it. I think we'll have to do a round 2 at some point if you're available at some time.
Yeah, it's just a long. I'll talk forever, but it's just it's a lot that goes into this, and I know people who are not experienced in bodybuilding and stuff like how do you stay motivated and stuff like that on this whole thing for 15, 16 years that I did it. It was just like I wasn't always motivated, to be honest with you. This entire prep, I didn't feel like going to the gym at all. I just knew that I was going to be retiring, and my son, he wrestles and stuff like that. So my main focus was like his wrestling tournaments, his wrestling practice, being a good father like that, which is, tough to do when you're in such a selfish sport. But I was disciplined. I just never could not look myself in the mirror if I didn't take care of business. And that was something that I learned early on, was just be disciplined, even though whatever's going on in the world around you, this is always a priority. People think that we're always motivated. We're always ready to go, we get to train today. We get to eat chicken today. No, man, we just do it because we don't want to look like a freaking chump, after skipping it or something, hold ourselves to a higher standard.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. So Gary, where can people find you, assuming you want to be found? I know you've got social media, stuff like that.
With the easiest way to find me would be Instagram. That handle is _real_GSIX. And anybody can send me a DM. I check all of them, and I'm always on there. And I check that other folder. So sometimes you send it and it doesn't make it to you. I check that folder too. So if you direct message me, if you're interested in training or just shooting the shit, I talk to everybody. I just, I'm just a regular bodybuilder. I just never like to elevate myself in the way, because I never liked when other pros or people did that to me when I was up and coming, where I couldn't have a conversation with them. There's other industries where you football players, baseball players. It's they're like celebrities. And it's how am I supposed to have a conversation with this guy? I don't think bodybuilding should be that way. We're all lifting the same fucking dumbbells anyway. So it's some guys just have bigger muscles. I think that everybody should be spoken to like that. So I answer everybody, and I'll chat with anyone.
That's nice. Yeah. Cheers for that, Gary. Take care.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.